the solution to that is often to dial it down. So to say, okay, well, could we switch over to just a YouTube video? Could we remove maybe the news and go to something that's a little bit more intentional and still, be fun, make it short, enjoy that. Could we do that? And then if we're doing that, okay, well, YouTube's okay. Maybe we switch down to listening to a podcast or listening to an audiobook. And then from there, maybe music. And from there, maybe ambient noise. And so if you give yourself that dial to move down, you can get to a lower dopamine state, but reward yourself the whole way.
Welcome to Hacking Your ADHD. I'm your host, William Kerb, and I have ADHD. On this podcast, I dig into the tools, tactics, and best practices to help you work with your ADHD brain. Hey team, this week we've got a returning guest, Skye Waterson, founder of Unconventional Organisation and host of the ADHD Skills Lab podcast. Skye's background includes studies in psychology, sociology, and public health, and she's spent over 7 years helping late-diagnosed adults create sustainable ADHD strategies. And before we get going, I wanted to tell you about one of the exciting things that has come from this episode, and that is that Skye and I are going to be doing a spin-off series on the show that focuses exclusively on the research side of ADHD. In these new episodes, we'll be taking a look at a single research paper and discussing the ins and outs of what the paper says, how it was conducted, and then trying to give you some practical takeaways. Episode lengths are going to be right back to the origins of this podcast, so we're aiming for something about 15 to 20 minutes long, but packed with information. Right now, we're just going with the name Research Recap with Skye, so we'll see if we can come up with anything a little bit more clever as we go along. Now, if that sounds like something you're interested in, good news, you don't have to do anything. These episodes are going to be coming out on the Hacking Your ADHD feed, so they'll come right up along with all your other podcast downloads. These episodes are going to be coming out every other Friday, starting this Friday, July 11th. And as a little preview, we're going to be talking about a paper called Evidence of Emotion Dysregulation as a Core Symptom of Adult ADHD, a Systematic Review. I know, that title sounds really riveting, but I think we do a pretty good job with it. Alright, enough about that. Let's jump into what this episode is about that you're listening to right now. In this episode, we're talking about dopamine and the dopamine transfer deficit theory, and Skye lays out her concept of the dopamine dial. We cover everything from how our brains misfire on rewards to fidget toys and why doom scrolling on your third screen might not be giving you the stimulation that you're hoping for. This episode is all about dialing it in instead of shutting it all down. If you'd like to follow along on the show notes page, you can find that at hackingYourADHD.com/229. All right, keep on listening to find out how to dial in that dopamine. All right, it's so exciting to have you back. And this time we were going to talk about this idea of the dopamine dial, and very much specifically in regards to a lot of the stuff we've been hearing about dopamine fasting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm excited. When I wrote this article, and obviously we talked about the book, and I thought I have to reach out to you. We have to discuss this in more detail because it's become more of a conversation, I think, this idea that we have too much dopamine. I think people like Huberman have really promoted this concept of reducing the amount of, stimulation we have. And I talk about this in my article, although I understand where they're coming from, like why they want to do that. The method of getting there seems to involve a lot of people with ADHD locking themselves in a windowless room and just hating their life. And I don't really believe, and there's research to back up the fact that I shouldn't believe, that we are designed to do that.
Yeah, and what I've seen from when I did my deep dive into dopamine fasting, like a year ago now, because I was getting all these ads for like how to do dopamine fasting online. I'm like, this is clearly scam. It's like, it got me like enough, like, I'm like, let's go and write about this.
Yeah.
But like, there is some science behind it, but it's mostly like extrapolated for other people from stuff around addiction, which I'm like, we don't have, like, that extrapolation doesn't necessarily hold true for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, what we have is, what I like to talk about when I talk about, how we work with dopamine is this concept of the dopamine transfer deficit theory. So this was a theory that I read all the way back in 2020. It was, promoted earlier than 2008. by Tripp and Wiggins. And I'll give you guys the link to the article. Honestly, I've probably given it to you before. I love this paper so much. But they talked about this idea, this theory that when you have ADHD, the reward that you get for doing something hard doesn't seem to be connecting as much for us. So if you're, for example, if you guys have ever heard of Pavlov's dog, the dog is going to get some kind of reward. It associates that with the sound of a bell. Eventually, the sound of a bell is enough to make a dog salivate. That's essentially the concept. And for people who don't have ADHD, what that means is if they know, okay, well, once I sit down and complete this task, I'm going to get a reward. I'm going to get to go outside, have a coffee, do something fun. Then when I'm sitting down, eventually my brain is going to associate, the sound of the focus music or whatever it is with that reward itself, to the point where the reward won't even give me the dopamine spike. It'll be the sound of the focus music that gives it to me. But if you have ADHD, what they've started theorizing, back in 2008 and even earlier, and now they have a lot more evidence for, is that we don't get that experience. We just sit down, listen to the focus music, go, I guess we got to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do it. And then at the end, we get to have a coffee and do something fun and go for a walk. And we're just like, thank God that's over. And so the whole system does not connect.
Yeah, and well, I can also really see that with like this behavioralism, the behavioralism lens that like it's also we're associating that focus music with doing something we don't want to do.
Yes.
At the same time,
Yeah, it
like,
could even backfire.
it's like, okay, I'm going to listen to this focus music and I'm going to sit down and do my taxes. And man, it's the because I remember learning about this in psychology in high school, and it was just like, yeah, for the behavioralism part to work, it has to be like, just like they have to be touching. And
Yeah.
a lot of times when we're doing that kind of stuff, it's
not. And what we see is that when you're doing tests, and they've done this in many different ways with people who have ADHD, we will take the short-term reward now. Thank you very much. Not the long-term reward in the future. And so what that means for dopamine detoxing, if you're going to reduce all of the dopamine, is we're not getting a dopamine spike anyway. So if I sit down, if I wake up and I have a cold shower and I sit in a windowless room and get things done, or, do all this, I'm obviously talking extreme with the dopamine detox. There's lots of ways to do it. Please don't come for me, people who do this, but you're putting yourself in a situation where you're reducing the dopamine spike that you get because you're going, okay, I'm going to be getting a reward for this later. But we know, we have this theory that it's not going to work for us. So basically the whole system is moot. And yes, if there's an addiction quality, there is something to be said for reducing the amount of overall stimulation, sitting in a room with the opposite of a windowless room, right? It's got TV and stimulants and all kinds of different things like coming at you. There's so many different kinds of stimulation now. Yes, we want to remove that, but it's more of a dial. And so this is why I developed the concept of the dopamine dial to kind of bridge that gap between dopamine transfer deficit and the dopamine detox, and allow us to get to the same place without having to wake up and use all of our limited decision-making power to push through.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've also thought about doing the dopamine fasting and stuff is that these kinds of things are also like, a lot of the things that they're asking you to give up are generally things that we should do less of in our life like, spend less time doom scrolling, spend less time mindlessly doing things. And it's like, so there is like that aspect of benefit, but it is not the advertised benefit.
Yes, yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, I think, we always talk about removing distractions. You can use apps like, I use Freedom on my phone. It's currently set up that I have one day when I can cancel it. And it's, I've got time off in the evening where I'm going, okay, well, I'm not going to go on social media. I have other options. But again, I'm dialing it down. I'm not removing
Mhm.
like a large amount of dopamine. I still will watch something. I'll just watch it in a more intentional way, with my husband, or I'll read a book, or I'll read like a really silly book. It doesn't have to be hardcore. So there's levels to it. But again, if you think of it less like an on-off switch and more like a dial, it becomes a lot more sustainable with ADHD.
Yeah, so we're just thinking about like instead of being like, hey, we're instead of having things at a 9 or 10 or something constantly up, just leveling it down, so that
Yes.
we can, because I mean, at the same time, yeah, we do have all this problems with like too much sensory information coming in is very hard to process, and it makes it
Mm-hmm.
like if I'm like looking at the mess on my desk, it's like, okay, it'd be nice to not have to have that sensory input and being like, oh, I should be really cleaning this up too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So when I talk about the dopamine dial, what I essentially mean is if you think about, one of your senses, you can go all the way from, so I talk about sound, for example. And I have an example in my article. You can actually just DM me hacking at Unconventional Organization, Instagram, and I'll send you the link. I did that last time. You guys were amazing. I got so many messages from you. Um, but when we look at the dial, we can see here, okay, we're going all the way from, I'm on social media and I'm watching the news. I think that might be the most extreme version of like visual, I'm watching the news in the background while I'm scrolling on social media. That's quite intense. And so if we're in that position and we say, okay, I'm here. I have ADHD and I woke up and I decided to do this. Now I'm in a really high dopamine state. The solution to that isn't to keep doing it until you have the motivation to turn everything off, because that's going to be
Mhm.
really hard for you. The solution to that is often to dial it down. So to say, okay, well, could we switch over to just a YouTube video? Could we remove maybe the news and go to something that's a little bit more intentional and still, be fun, make it short, enjoy that. Could we do that? And then if we're doing that, okay, well, YouTube's okay. Maybe we switch down to listening to a podcast or listening to an audiobook. And then from there, maybe music. And from there, maybe ambient noise. And so if you give yourself that dial to move down, you can get to a lower dopamine state, but reward yourself the whole way, which
Mhm.
is really crucial if we're not getting rewards at the end. Like, just take the idea of rewards at the end and throw it out the window. Then you'll feel good about it. But, if we're working off this assumption, this theory that we're not going to get it, then we need to give ourselves a reward now.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think one of the things that's like popping to my head here too is this uh what's it called? Uh but with like we want to like when we do need to have a little bit of extra stimulation to stay focused on something,
Mm-hmm.
having like that's a lot of times when people will turn to their phone. They're like, okay, I want to watch the
Yeah.
news, but it's not quite engaging enough. So I'm gonna just
Mm-hmm.
pop out my phone and kind of like I'll scroll something while I'm
Mm-hmm.
catching up on this, and
Mm-hmm.
it becomes this thing where it's like, oh, I'm not engaged in either thing. It's too
Mm-hmm.
much. But like if we like pick up like a little fidget and we're just holding that and like
Yeah.
doing something with our hands, or I know people that like to knit while paying attention to things,
Mm-hmm.
doodle, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's like, okay, that is the same idea of like dialing it down. I am using something to keep in touch, but I'm not doing something that's why
Exactly.
when I see people talking about using phones as fidgets, I'm like, it's I if it works for you, I okay, but I don't know many people that's true for.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. And so conversely, we're talking, instead of detoxing, we're talking about adding things into your life. My recommendation, I worked with clients, this is the basis of a lot of what I teach. And I've taught for 5 years with hundreds of entrepreneurs and executives and professionals. And my recommendation is usually, hey, you're understimulated. I know that sounds really crazy, but you only have your phone. It's a little box. It looks at you and you listen to it, but you don't have like retro toys and fidgets because you're like, oh, I don't need that. I'm an adult. So,
Mhm.
so really my recommendation to people is we need to get you a few lower stimulation forms of fun, forms of dopamine, and we need to bring more dopamine into your life at just a reduced point.
Hmm. Yeah, and the term I was forgetting earlier is the default mode network, which is
Mm-mm-mm.
the thing I've like was learning about and just like I'm no, there's not enough research here yet, but it's getting there. But the thing that
Yeah,
really clicked with me was this idea that with ADHD we tend to not switch out of that default mode network where we're into the task something network.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
and when we're not doing that switch, it means that we're not able to get enough focus on one thing. So if we add that extra little bit of stimuli, that's when we're like, okay, we're getting into that focused realm by having this fidget, by
exactly.
having, like having a conversation while we're on a walk rather than just sitting and
Oh
talking to
yeah,
someone.
that's a big one. That's a big one. I was listening to Steve Jobs did that. I was reading his book, and he was a big like go for a very long walk and have a chat. And I'm the same. Like it's hugely helpful. So again, it's these ways of giving ourselves permission to bring more into our lives in a way that contributes to us getting more things done. And that's really the key. And I think a lot of times, especially for those of you who have come from or still maybe are in a very corporate work environment, it can be a very sterile environment. Like, yes, you might have a lot of stuff like on your desk or in your office, but we still have a little bit of difficulty with this idea of, fidgets and noises. I know I had a Rubik's Cube that I attached to my bag because it was acceptable fidget because it's like, oh, it's just a keychain. For those of you who have this problem as well, I highly recommend getting a really fun keychain. Um, but it is important, and also, one of the things I often discuss with people is, before phones, people had a ton of stuff to play with.
Yeah. I mean, that's just there's so many things that because there's so many, yeah, the range of what fidgets can be is great because
Mm-hmm.
like I have from like rocks that I've found that are just like nice
Mm-hmm.
and round and I can roll in my hand. It's great. To
Yeah,
like
totally.
this fidget that I spent like way too much money on. It was like 45, $50. That's like
Mm-hmm.
this really heavy aluminum thing that
Mm-hmm.
just it has such smooth action when I roll it in my hand. Just
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
I can just do this forever. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And it is like so you can have a lot of different things. Or I find the real important thing with those kind of things though is to be like, it needs to be, and I it needs to be for me. I don't want to be distracting other people. So a lot of the
Yeah.
noisemaker ones, I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't that if I'm alone in my office, I could do that, but
Yeah.
I know it would drive my wife insane. So
I know I recently moved to a space where I've got my own office and I'm like, ooh, what can I get? What can I add? But yeah, it can be anything. And even, people have those little, again, I kind of go to retro games a lot. Did you ever play, this is going to age me, but those games where you press like a button and there's water and you have to get like little hoops over a
hmm,
ring,
yeah,
like that kind of stuff. Or you've got like a little box and it's got metal balls in it and you're supposed to move it around. Like you can still buy that stuff on,
yeah,
Amazon or eBay. So check it out. People like Sudoku. Some people like a comic book. It can be a really short way to get started. And so, again, it's really about lining yourself up. And this kind of corresponds with what I talk about when I talk about a step into focus routine. Instead of thinking to yourself, right, I have to go into a space, I have to turn off all distractions, I have to get it done, and then wondering why you're ignoring it, doing this for like 2 hours. Um, Thinking about something fun you could do that would get you to sit down and actually get started and then dialing that down. So we could start with a comic book, go to a retro game, write the task down. What are you going to get done? Move to a fidget, move to some background noise. Like there's so many things we can play with. And For me personally, one of the reasons I loved writing about this, it was kind of a passion project. I just was like, right, we have to write about this. And one of the reasons I think it resonated with so many people, because it's the most popular thing I've ever written, was because it's about this idea of making life more fun.
And just more engaging, not trying to, because we have enough like miserable stuff out there right now.
Yeah.
And we want to be this intentional engagement with what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
When a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times especially when I was looking at the dopamine fast stuff, I was like, this is unintentionally just falling into trying to get some sort of stimulation uh through lots of video, lots of, whatever it is. And I'm like, I can see why this is a problem for a lot of people and why the dopamine fast seems so appealing.
Mm-hmm. Just cut it off,
Yeah.
just get it done.
But yeah, I do think there's, yeah, like figuring out ways you can, but I know that often doesn't work with ADHD anyways. We're just like, when I'm like, oh, I just have this physical need to go play this video game. I'm like, my
Mm-hmm.
brain's like just shouting at me like, you're never going to not feel this way again. If you just
Mm-hmm.
ignore trying to go play this game, it's going to distract you for the rest of the day. So you might as well go do it right now. And that's not true, but it
Mm-hmm.
feels true, which is
Mm-mm.
really
That's
like
so interesting.
one of the things where I'm like,
Yeah.
I have to remind myself, I don't feel feelings forever.
Yeah.
And which is so important in so many areas where I'm like, if I'm mad, if I'm sad, anything, I'm like, there is no feeling I have ever felt forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is evidence for that. But in the moment, it always feels like I'm never going to
Mm-hmm.
feel a different way.
What do you do in that situation? I'm so curious.
Well, if I have this presence of mind to remind myself, that's usually like, okay. And then it's a lot of like trying to step back from the emotion a little bit and like examine why I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling it, why.
Mm-hmm.
So like if there's something, like there's a reason why I'm mad. Oh my God, being mad is so funny with that too, because often like I'm not even mad about the thing I'm mad about. I'm like, I'm mad
Yeah.
because I didn't have any good food all day or some I'm dehydrated and
It's often that one.
I was like, haven't had anything to drink and hadn't had anything to eat and my kids were not listening and I'm like, oh, that's why I'm mad. It's not because they were actually that annoying. It was just
Mm-hmm.
in the moment
Yeah.
I wasn't taking care of myself right. And then being like, if I yelled, having to be like, okay, that was not, I have to go apologize because
Mm-hmm.
that's not what I was
Yeah.
a good parent. Um,
Mm.
and uh, which usually happens like because I'm like, can you guys just brush your teeth without having a fight, please? No, okay. That's I'm like, why haven't I learned the lesson of always sending you up separately? Keep thinking it's gonna work. Uh,
It is difficult raising kids with neurodiverse. I had somebody on and they talked about that. Like, when you're neurodiverse, you're raising kids that might be neurodiverse because it's genetic. It's like it's this whole journey
yeah,
that no one understands. It's a new version of people don't understand.
yeah. But yeah, it is a lot about like stepping back. Okay, I'm not gonna feel this way forever, but also
Mm-hmm.
being okay with feeling things too. Like,
Yeah.
I read some really sad stories in the news yesterday, and it was like, yeah, I feel
Mm-hmm.
really bad about this, but it's justified. That stuff I was reading about was terrible, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
really sorry that
Mm-hmm.
those things happened. Even though
Mm-hmm.
weren't related to anything I did, I was just, it's sad. uh, and so it's like, yeah, it's okay to feel these things, but to know I don't have to live here either.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's amazing just having that like sense of like, okay, like the acceptance piece and being, I, I know I won't be here forever, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna be sad for these things that happen, right?
Yeah. 100%. And sometimes I find it's good at that point to kind of have a little chat with yourself and negotiate a little bit and say, hey, like, okay, cool. So we're here. We're having this feeling. It's gonna go away, but it's here now. Is there something we could do to make this task that we still want to do a little bit easier? And with the computer game example, I've sometimes watched Twitch streams of people playing the computer game that I want to play. Um, And with the sad story, sometimes I'll be like, okay, I'm going to go downstairs. I'm going to work with my family because I want to be around people right now. So you don't always have to just go like, no, that's it. We're locking in. You can adjust a little bit, negotiate with the inner you.
Yeah. Or just be like, hey, I'm going to see if, I'm going to get out my timer set 10 minutes. If I still really feel
Yes.
like playing in 10 minutes, I'm just going to do something else for 10 minutes and see how I feel in 10 minutes. And it's like, oh, I do not feel those same emotions now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly true. That's totally a great form of negotiation as well.
Yeah. And it's just, and the one thing I know with negotiating with myself is I have to be honest with myself. Is like, if
You do.
like if I feel like playing in 10 minutes, I said I would do that. I need to do that because otherwise I don't need to go down the road of not trusting my own negotiations.
Yeah, lying to yourself is a huge problem. So many clients I have where I have to be like, okay, cool. So what's the real reason you're not going to do this? And they're like,
Mm.
it's boring. It sucks. And you're like, okay, good. We're getting somewhere. Like this is the truth. And then we take it from there. But yeah, so much of, especially now, I think if you're like the world of getting things done and productivity is such a like performative world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you've ever gone on YouTube and you've seen people with their perfect desks and like this is my day. And I used to be such an addict of that stuff, especially before I got diagnosed. And we can almost perform for ourselves as well.
Mm. Yeah. Well, and it's like, it's, yeah, it's all that comparison to other people's like highlight
Mm-hmm.
reels kind of thing. Like I was thinking about this
Mm-hmm.
just last night. I went over to like a board game night at a friend's house and we do this weekly and it's gotten to the point where like they're not completely spick and span when we get there. And I'm like, I appreciate this that you like you
Yeah.
know that we're not going to judge you for, but we everyone that comes has kids and we all know how that
Mm-hmm.
works and stuff. And
Yep.
uh, although I could be very before I had kids, I was very messy too. That they're not the full responsibility for that. But it was like I was like, oh yeah, like I remember so many times going to other people's house and just being like, man, why can't I keep my house as clean as they do? And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, I'm like, yeah, but when they come over, I've cleaned for 2 hours. They're thinking the
Mm-hmm.
same
And they
thing.
probably have too. Yeah, they
Yeah,
probably have too. Or somebody loves cleaning.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's just a 100% different human from you.
yeah. And it's like, yeah, you especially when we're like ADHD brains comparing ourselves to neurotypical or someone like
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
comparing. Yeah, some people like they're like, yeah, I can't feel comfortable in my house if it's messy, and it's like, okay, I don't want
that's
that either.
different. Yeah. Yeah, and you know what I always talk about this, but we always compare ourselves to like the highlight reel of the neurotypical as well. In
Mm,
our mind, the neurotypical is up at 6, meditating, yoga, perfect kids, perfect house, at work, nailing it every day. And I haven't even met any neurotypicals who are doing that.
yeah, I remember writing an episode about like what would it be like if we didn't have ADHD, and my first thing was we'd still have problems.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we'd still have problems and I think it's especially now, it's funny when I was in fact the 2024 version of that article, the dopamine transfer deficit, they talked about that. They were like all of these experiences that you have with ADHD, they do exist in neurotypicals. It's just about that pervasive, persistent across
Hmm.
time element that is affecting it. So it's not like it doesn't happen. It's not like you would never experience that again.
Yeah, this is the very funny thing too. It's like, yeah, it's with like the everyone's a little ADHD, but it's the no, it's the
We're not
ADHD part.
little.
Yeah, the ADHD
Yeah.
part is that it is severely impacting my life in some way.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's a struggle. People ask me that. I get questions by people like, you don't seem ADHD. Like, do you use these strategies? The answer is yes, 100% every single day. I used the dopamine dial yesterday.
Yeah. And I also feel bad about myself when I know that I could be using these strategies and I'm not.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I will teach on something and then be like, go home and be like, okay, Skye, it's time to do that. It's time to get back on that. It's it's a journey and it's a process, and that's why it's so important to keep connecting, keep talking about it, keep talking to other people who experience it, so that you do know that it's okay, and
Mhm.
keep learning systems and strategies to support it, because it is a different way of working and it feels overwhelming sometimes, but it's overwhelming because you've learned two things. You're
Mhm.
like bilingual for systems.
Yeah, and it's letting go of some of that, like trying to be on 24/7. Like that's part of
Mm-hmm.
why we feel that need to like dial things up to a
Yeah.
borderline 11.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. You got
we're
the
going over
news, you got
10.
TikTok, you got social media, you got it all happening. Um, and um, and yeah, that idea of switching from like high stimulation down to zero, it's it's just so painful. That wall, I mean, I've talked to people, I ask people like, how does that feel to you? And people say it's a wall of awful. Obviously, Jessica talked about that idea, but also just somebody said it feels like something is trying to eat their soul when they're doing that. It's a horrible feeling.
Yeah. Although I have done some interesting experiments where like you just sitting
Mm-hmm.
in the feelings of like, okay, I'm going to be purposely bored. How does this feel?
Mm-hmm.
Just
Mm-hmm.
sit there and feel that. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that doesn't feel good, but it's also not awful as my brain was predicting it would feel.
Interesting.
Like, and then, I mean, and then there's the difference between doing this for 5 minutes versus doing this all day long.
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, I think it's a good exercise. I think all of these things are good. And it is, again, it's that playful experimentation space, though. I think that's the key. Experimenting and keeping a bit of humor with what you're doing, because
Yeah.
it's not
I
going
mean,
to
it
work
is funny when you
100%.
like tried to do that. I'm like, I'm gonna sit in boredom. Okay. All right. Now, how many hours was that? 5 seconds. Oh, no. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. And
that
and
feeling when you look at the clock and you're just like, how has no time passed?
you're like, God, I must be time blind.
Yeah, it's really amazing how pervasive the symptoms are through so many things that we just don't assume that we're just like, oh yeah, this
Mhm.
is how I live, but I don't actually think about how these things affect me beyond certain areas.
Oh yeah, 100%. I always get a bit of a chuckle out of it because I work now primarily with entrepreneurs, and sometimes I'll have people, reach out to me and say, "Oh, oh, I have ADHD, but like it doesn't affect me." And then you'll see their team, and they'll be like, "It does affect me. Please help." It's affecting so many areas of his life, and he has no idea. And it's very pervasive, and it can be. Eh, It's a constant journey. I think people are always really surprised, especially when they go through the diagnostic process and it's like a list of 12
Mhm.
things, and they're like, okay, this must be it. And it's like, oh no, if you look at the diagnostic criteria, there's actually like this little bit about executive functioning right at the bottom. And, there's a bit about emotional dysregulation that doesn't even make the cut. So, no, there's a few more things.
Yeah, and I'm like, I've heard this people be like, oh, I hate when people make, they get diagnosed with something and make their whole life, and it's like, it kind of is like, I don't get to just switch it off when it's inconvenient because it's
Mm-hmm.
almost always
Yeah.
inconvenient.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing as well is like, if we come back to this idea of dopamine detoxing, a lot of that comes down to, because we're talking often, like you said, about the addiction side of it, a real battle. You're really battling against this thing. You fight it every day. And it's not a great way to live long term. It can be pretty exhausting and pretty, you know, not necessarily positive for your mental health and how you see yourself. And I think that's why I've felt compelled to write about the idea of a dial and discuss that bit with people, because I didn't want people to feel like they had to just wake up and do battle every single
Mhm.
day.
Yeah, and in same regards with addiction is this idea of harm reduction rather than abstinence, because
Mm-hmm.
for especially you have ADHD, trying to cut out all dopamine is going to be a losing battle almost 100% of the day. Well,
The
especially because
research says so.
yeah, and especially because like dopamine is not something that we like choose to have or not have. Like we will like even if you're bored, be like, oh, that is a weird spot on the wall. I wonder what that's about. I'm like, oh, I am using a bunch of imagination things and getting tons of dopamine from having a story pop out because there's a that tile
Mm-hmm.
looks like a face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so being like, okay, I can't. There's no 100% abstinence here, but how can I, if I am feeling harm from having too many of these activities, how can I just have a reduction?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really true. And I wouldn't speak to the addiction because I'm not an expert on it, but I think definitely, this idea of reduction and really also coming back to the why. Like, why is it that you are trying to, you know, put a timer on for 5 minutes so that you don't go play the video game?
Mhm.
Like, what is the purpose of what you'd like? What are you doing overall? What is your goal? What is the thing that you're doing to reach your goal? Because I tell you what, this happened to me, especially when I was in university. Sometimes I wanted to not do the thing because the thing wasn't necessary or it wasn't the right thing. Like sometimes
Mhm.
it's about stepping back as well and saying, okay, is my brain are we talking a little bit about renegotiating our priorities here? And I don't mean like throwing the baby out with the bathwater and suddenly we're, you know, three new business ideas deep, you know, but I do think it's worth considering that might be a conversation as well.
And this is also like it relates a lot to burnout and people being like, yeah, I'm just doing too much stuff, and so then I
Mm-hmm.
need to have this big crash where I'm just you know, not really paying attention to anything, but having all the stimulation at once. You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
phone, got a little screen, the medium screen, and the big screen going. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's
I
still
love
not
how we
enough.
keep coming back to this and we're just like adding more things to
Yeah.
this scenario. But yeah, 100%. And the
Oh,
video game.
there have definitely been times where I've been like, I've had my laptop, my phone, and there's something on TV, and I'm like, what am I doing? What? I can't even pay attention to one of these.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think that's actually a really good point because, one of the benefits I think of ADHD is that if you're neurotypical, you can find yourself in a situation where you're like, wait, it's been 10 years. Why am I still doing this? I didn't want to do this. Oh, well, I just kind of did it because it was the job that I was doing. Whereas if you're the kind of person who, if you're not getting dopamine and also some research, a lot of research shows intrinsic motivation from what you're doing, um, then you are more likely to question it and to want to change it, which long term, you've got this life, you want to live it in the best way possible, that can actually be a benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there have been times where it's just like, yeah, why am I doing this? I don't like doing it. And it's like, okay, let's do something different. And
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I can't imagine doing something I don't like for 10 years. Like that's
But yeah, people do, and it can be a real problem where they're like, I don't like it, I really don't like it, I really, really don't like it. And you're like, why don't you just change? Like as an ADHD person, I'm like, I've thrown my life up in the air like half a dozen times.
yeah. And well, I mean, and there are times too where I'm sitting like uh getting started on things. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to do it this way forever. And it's like, no, I can change
Mm-mm-mm.
this, like when I
Yes.
started writing my newsletter, I was like, oh man, I'm doing these things. Like I didn't like how the format was, and I was just like, oh wait, this is my newsletter. I get to choose what I want. I'm just gonna change this to being, every other week, and I'm gonna change how I do the format, and it's gonna be way more fun.
Yes. 100%. That is like number one thing take away from this conversation because so many times with everything, we feel like we have to just do it one way. I mean, in some ways, the dopamine detox is part of that conversation as well. We're like, right, time to do the thing that I don't want to do in the
Mm.
way that I don't want to do it. And it's like life can be adjusted, like a lot of it.
Yeah, and be like, oh, you know what? I don't want to be on social media all the time. I want to be on social media. I mean, that's why, like, you mentioned freedom earlier, and
Mm-hmm.
sponsor of a podcast previously. Not right now. I don't
Ah,
think. We'll see. Maybe
sorry,
they'll come
freedom.
back. Maybe
Yeah.
they'll come back.
Yeah.
Just but because but I had reached out to them because I'm like, this is something I already use. Like, this is such an amazing
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
I can modulate how much I'm doing things, and
Mm-hmm.
it is how I have it. I set up a tiered system on my computer, so like at the last 10 minutes of every hour, I could go on social media. and check things if I want. You
Interesting.
like if I'm like, oh, there's something I wanted to look up and be like, da da da.
Mm-hmm.
I can just slot it
Mm-hmm.
into my schedule. I'm going to do it at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I
Mm-hmm.
have like so many like things that are like, hey, you should check this thing out on Instagram, and I'm like, walking Instagram.
I know they always find a new way to get
Yeah.
there.
But so I was like, so I like have that, but I'm like, okay, yeah, I can. But
Mm-hmm.
then I still be like, during the day, be just like, okay, I'm like done with that, and I'm just like unconsciously opening up a tab and like bringing up like Facebook,
Oh yeah.
Sky or
Oh yeah.
whatever, and I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I didn't even think about wanting to do that. That just happened,
Yeah.
and thank
Yeah.
God I had something that helped modulate that because I would have just
Yeah.
been off in there, and
100%.
um, that's when I usually have the hardest time stepping back and looking at how I'm feeling is when
Mm-hmm.
I have that like
Yeah.
unending round of stimulation.
100%. And that's the thing. It's like at no point am I saying don't use something like freedom. I love freedom. I use it all the time or other things like that. But what I am saying is, there's multiple things to do instead of that. One of them is to just be in the feeling, like you said.
Mhm.
Feel the feeling, see how it goes. And then the other one is to crack open a book, a comic book, or do Sudoku or go outside or something like that. And it's not about this all or nothing that I think sometimes it can
Yeah,
feel like.
yeah, I think that's precisely to say. We feel like there's like it's this or I'm gonna go. Just I don't have another option. This is the only thing I can do.
It's this or sit in a room with nothing because all I had was screens and they're all off now.
Yeah, I did. Started doing a bunch of like puzzle books this year, and I've been enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
I have not done them recently. I realize
Mm-hmm.
because there's a pile of stuff on top of them, but uh, they are. It is like a nice thing to be like, oh yeah, just gonna do this puzzle for a while. I can write
Mm-hmm.
without my screen, and
Mm-hmm.
okay. And then
Yeah.
it's like it's also I'm like it also doesn't suck me in for hours. I'm like, oh, I did one puzzle, and
Mm-hmm.
now I feel like I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. But I don't think that it's funny. Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I'm just laughing at the idea that that could become part of the dopamine detox conversation. You
Yeah,
come in and you're like, no, totally, cold showers, and that's great. But have you ever thought about also doing a puzzle, like at the beginning?
yeah. It's like I'm addicted to puzzles. I can't stop, and I'm after a while, my brain's like, I am done with the crypto.
Yeah.
This is too much.
Yeah, your brain is like, this is not gonna work as an addiction process. Yeah, and looks for something else. And that's where it kind of becomes fun as well, because if you think about what we are motivated by, it's so interesting when you look at the research that indicates that it's intrinsic motivation for us often. The extrinsic motivation stuff, it can work, but again, it's not really connected. Like the holiday at the end of the year is a thing that is happening. It's not necessarily a thing that is motivating you to get up in the morning and work. So it's really important for us to have something else, because sometimes I think it's so interesting that we all assume our brains are the same, right? So
Mhm.
you don't realize that the holiday at the end of the year or the break thing at the end of during the weekend is actually motivating somebody who doesn't have ADHD to work throughout the week. They get that dopamine boost because it's being transferred from that reward that they're getting at the end of the day, at the end of the week. And when you think about that, you realize that our entire life is built around that concept for neurotypicals.
Mhm.
Every day has like a reward at the end. There's
Yeah,
and so yeah, of course it's working.
yeah. But yeah, it's like yeah, we don't need to have the dessert at the end of the meal. We can have it at the beginning of it. Just it's fun.
Have a little bit at the beginning, eat it
Yeah.
throughout the meal.
I mean, that was one of the things that like hard to get my head around when I was like learning about this is my kids that very selective eaters and stuff, and they're like, reading about the like literature, they're like, yeah, don't limit dessert to be the end. Put it at the beginning. Get them interested in eating, and so
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, I don't like this. This feels uncomfortable to me. This feels the wrong way to do this, but
Yeah.
uh, oh, it can be very effective, and
Yeah.
Also being like, yeah, I don't. And some of the stuff where I'm just like, man, the research is wrong. Where it
Mm.
doesn't feel wrong, like because I'm like, yeah, my kids are super responsible with eating sweets and stuff. They're like, oh, I don't like this one, and I'm like, but that's still candy.
Yeah. You're just like, but you have to eat all of it. It's
Yeah,
candy.
and they're like, oh yeah, I'm done with my ice cream. I'm like, there's still ice cream. You can't. That's not
I
how my
don't.
brain works.
No, neither. Maybe we were trained on a different system.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh, I did put the sugar stuff on the pedestal, and this was really effective for them. Like it's not effective for everyone, but like the way that
Yeah.
okay, that's amazing.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's like this might be how you, if you're listening, feel about this whole idea. It feels a little bit uncomfortable. You're like, should I be doing this? This is going against what I've learned, but it's very effective.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like the difference between the concept of eating the frog versus just like building your momentum to do it.
Exactly.
And I know some
Exactly.
people
Yeah.
eating the frog works amazing for them. I
Hmm.
it I procrastinate so much if I try to do that.
I have to work my way up to the frog. Like I'll eat the frog in the morning, but I can't just wake up and eat the frog. I need to do something else.
Yeah, I'm like if I build some momentum, I do some other stuff first, and then I'm like
Yeah.
I'll find myself doing the thing that I didn't want to do. It's like, oh yeah, well I
Yeah.
was tired of doing this other stuff. Okay, let's do this email that I didn't want to send. And it's like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And it's yeah, it gets fun. I think it's the flexibility, the experimentation, the permission to try things.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're coming up on time here. So do you have any final thoughts for the audience?
Um, Adjust your systems if they're not working. Don't just keep telling yourself it's you. Try adjusting your systems and then see how you feel. Like you said, having that little chicken with yourself.
Yeah. Ask yourself, what would this be like if it was easy? You
Mm-hmm.
can make it that.
Yeah.
It's like, what can I, like, oh, can I make it easy? Let's try.
Yeah. Is it going to help if I print it out? Is it going to help if I do something fun at the start? Like, what are we doing to make it different?
Yeah. And if people want to find out more about your book and your coaching practice and all that, where should they go?
Yeah. So, I run Unconventional Organization. I work primarily with, executives, entrepreneurs who want help with their ADHD systems. So you can find me at Unconventional Organization on Instagram. You can DM me hacking, and I will send you a link to the book. I'll send you a link to this article. And then if you want to find me on my podcast, it's called the ADHD Skills Lab, and you can find all the information about that and some other articles as well at unconventionalorganization.com.
All right. Thanks. Good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show again. I'm sure that a lot of people are getting a lot out of this because I know I was getting a bunch of ads for dopamine stuff, and it's confusing when you get stuff like that. And it's nice to have some like, oh, maybe we should do things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I kept getting them as well, and I was like, I have to say something.
Thanks again to Skye for coming on the show, and thank you for sticking with us all the way to the end. Don't forget that this Friday, you can watch out for the brand new series on hacking your ADHD where Skye and I dive into ADHD research for 15 minutes at a time. No need to try and look up anything if you're already subscribed to the show. It should show up right in your podcast player. All right, let's do a quick rundown of today's top tips. 1. The dopamine dial is a mental model that helps you modulate your levels of stimulation rather than flipping an on and off switch. Instead of outright quitting a stimulating activity all at once, i.e. trying a dopamine detox, you dial down your stimulation in smaller steps. 2. Doing the hard thing now and waiting for the reward later often doesn't land. Instead, we often need to feel a reward during the process, not just at the end. We can use the dopamine dial to reward ourselves with just enough stimulation to stay engaged without pushing our brain into full-blown distraction or burnout mode. It's not about denying ourselves stimulation, it's about using it intentionally and dialing it to the right level. 3. Try negotiating with your brain when you're feeling emotionally overwhelmed or hyper-focused on a desire, such as you're feeling like you need to play video games right this instant. Try taking a 10-minute breather where you reassess those feelings rather than trying to force or deny that urge outright. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear what you thought of this episode. Feel free to connect with me over at hackingyyouradhd.com/contact. If you'd like links or to read this episode's transcript, you can go to the show notes page at hackingyyouradhd.com/229. And if you'd like even more Hacking Your ADHD, be sure to sign up for my newsletter, Any and All Distractions, which comes out every other week. In it, I give out my best distractions of the week, be they what I'm reading, what I'm playing, or what I'm watching. I also try to give out a few bits of actionable advice in each newsletter, although your mileage is going to vary there. If that sounds like something you're interested in, head over to hackingyyouradhd.com/newsletter to sign up. I also wanted to make sure that you knew about the Hacking Your ADHD Patreon, which you can find at hackingyyouradhd.com/Patreon. I've gone with a pay-what-you-want model, meaning that all levels of the Patreon will receive all the same stuff. You can pay $0 or $2 or $10, and it's all the same. The only real difference coming from the roles that are assigned on the Hacking Your ADHD Discord, which you get access to from the Patreon. So if either of those things sound like something you're interested in, head over to hackingyyouradhd.com/Patreon to sign up. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/@hackingyyouradhd. And finally, if you'd like to support the show, the best way to do so is to tell someone about the show, especially if you think a particular episode would resonate with them. Just click the share button on your podcast player. And now for your moment of dad. How do you make a tissue dance? You put a little boogie in it.